Mr. Speaker, I rise to make a very short contribution because I think the Honourable Attorney General has done a stellar job in outlining and reinforcing all of the efforts that the Cayman Islands have done, what we have done, what we continue to do in the face of the threats to the jurisdiction, but also to ensure that we are not just talking the talk when it comes to global cooperation in fighting anti-money laundering and the financing of terrorism, fighting anti-corruption, fighting tax evasion, and generally demonstrating why we are and why we should continue to be a leader in the global financial services industry. Mr. Speaker, as I said, the Honourable Attorney General gave us a good overview of some of the very early efforts the country has taken from the first tax information agreement with the US, as he referred, in 2001. But Mr. Speaker, our efforts to tackle these ills, these global ills which plague many jurisdictions, and the fight needs to be a global fight. And as such, we have demonstrated our willingness to be active participants in helping to shape these standards of what are considered acceptable with respect to exchange of information. The Honourable Attorney General spoke about the various parties to which we now exchange this information for tax purposes from the early turn of the century to where we are now. We have over 110, Mr. Speaker, 110 exchange of information for tax purposes, countries that we exchange on request, but we also, as the Attorney General indicated, we have now moved to adopting the common reporting standard as it relates to the automatic exchange of requests, and we have just as many partners in that process as well. I think it's also important to underscore what was said with respect to the lack of secrecy laws that exist on our books. And Mr. Speaker, it's unfortunate because when people don't understand or intentionally misrepresent, depending on their perspective, what we do in Cayman, it is often with the claim of things being done shrouded in secrecy. But as the Honourable Attorney General has so poignantly pointed out, don't just take our word for it. Refer to the organization, the OECD Global Forum, who is seen as the global standard setters for these initiatives in their recent report on information for tax purposes. They have reinforced that point. And so, Mr. Speaker, gone are the days of the firm. And that's one thing we have to say about the effects of Hollywood. They live on long after reality has determined otherwise. But it's unfortunate, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I would like to table in this honourable House just so members will have copies of a pictogram that just gives an overview of some of the key initiatives that this country has been engaged with since the 1960s up until present, 2017. And Mr. Speaker, obviously, this doesn't capture what we're doing here today with respect to the amendments and the changes that we've made to further enhance our regime. But this, Mr. Speaker, should give everybody in this honourable House a clear understanding and ammunition to be able to help to inform. Because, Mr. Speaker, we have to do better as a country. We have to do better as an industry to help people not just across the pond, but even our own people, to help from a domestic perspective to get the message out, as well as an international perspective, so people really understand who we are and what we do versus what we are not. We're not a tax haven. We do not have the secrecy laws, as I said, was expounded upon by the Honourable Attorney General, as confirmed by the OECD themselves in their latest 2017 review of our jurisdiction. We do not have the anonymous numbered accounts that would facilitate the kinds of mischief, I should say, being very kind. We do not have the double taxation agreements that would facilitate the abuse of such tax agreements in the efforts to promote tax evasion or aggressive tax avoidance. So, Mr. Speaker, there are a number of things that we have been doing, we continue to do, and we're committed to continue doing to ensure that we do our part to see that the global financial services industry thrives for the benefit of the global economy. And we have done so from the very beginning. And as, again, just wanting to underscore what the Honourable Attorney General has said, because I think it's something people need to understand. We have not designed our tax system in a way to try to aggressively market the jurisdiction in a way that creates harmful taxation to other jurisdictions. We have never had corporate tax. We have never had the income tax, but we have a very robust tax system of customs duties, stamp duties, licensing fees, business tariffs, that, Mr. Speaker, generally equates to about roughly 25% of GDP. So this is very, very comparable to other jurisdictions that may have the corporate taxation, the income taxation. So because our tax system is different, is often misunderstood. And those are just some of the key, not just messages, but understanding of the jurisdiction, the kinds of value that we add. And Mr. Speaker, the government, as the Honourable Attorney General has said, has, long before I took on this particular role, I know certainly we have continued to do so. We didn't just hit the ground running. I think we got off to a flying start when it comes to continuing the engagement on the international level to ensure that we help people to understand who we are, what we've done, but yet we do know that there are many, many forces that are lining up to try to ensure that message, that true message, is somehow lost in the rhetoric. And I've often said this on the radio, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure if I had the opportunity to say it in this House before, but it reminds me of an adage where you say, why let the truth get in the way of a good story? And unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, it just means that we have to ensure that the truth of what we do, our regulatory regime, the robustness of our cooperation and efforts to engage to ensure that we are partners in the fight of financial crime is not lost when the stories are created. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I will, with your permission, table this graph. This is a work in progress, Mr. Speaker, because as I said, every time we make a change to make our system even more robust, even more cooperative, even more innovative in the fight in financial crime, this we expect to change. So this is a snapshot, but it'll just give an overview of all of the work that we have done for many, many decades to ensure that Cayman continues to do our part and why we have earned our place in the global financial services industry as an international financial center. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.